If you are listening while the rain keeps falling outside, you can let it stay in the background, like a steady soft curtain of sound, and you can settle into a comfortable position. You do not need to do anything special. You can lower the volume a little if that feels better, and let the sound stay gentle and even. The pacing here will be slow and steady, and it will remain that way. Nothing surprising will happen. Nothing dramatic will happen. We will stay with one ordinary object, and we will keep returning to it in the same calm way. Tonight we will spend time with a fork. We will spend time with its simple shape, and with the way it rests in a home, and with the way it is picked up and set down. We will stay close to the fork as it moves through quiet routines. It will be the same fork, again and again, in the same gentle loop. The fork will not ask you to think hard. It is just there, doing a small job, and then resting again. A fork is a handheld eating utensil with multiple short prongs. It is used to pick up food, to hold food, and to guide food during eating and serving. It is not complicated. It is a small tool that stays near plates and bowls. It is chosen, used, washed, and stored. It repeats that pattern in a calm way. Now we can move on. Chapter 1: The object at a glance. A fork is a small tool that stays near meals. In many homes it is part of cutlery, and it is part of flatware, and it is part of a place setting. It is one of the pieces that people reach for without looking closely. A drawer opens, and a fork is selected, and it is carried to a bowl or a plate. Then it is set down. Then it is lifted again. The fork has a handle and a front end with prongs. The prongs are the narrow points that touch and hold food. Another word for a prong is a tine. A fork has multiple prongs, and the prongs help it pick up and hold small pieces. The handle is the part held in the hand. Between handle and prongs there is an area where the fork narrows, sometimes called the neck. The fork is held with a simple grip, and it moves in small arcs from plate to mouth and back again. A fork can be used during eating, and it can be used during serving. During serving, a fork can pick up a portion and guide it from a serving bowl to a plate. It can hold food in place for a moment while another utensil helps. This may vary. The fork stays calm in the hand. It does not need force. It is guided by small movements, and it is placed down again when the serving moment is done. Even the shape feels predictable. The prongs begin at the wider front area where they start, sometimes called the bowl, in an informal way. The handle extends back in a simple line. The overall length and the width can change across different forks, and some forks feel small, and some feel standard, and some feel large. This may vary, but the basic idea is steady and familiar: a handle to hold, and prongs to touch food. The fork often meets food gently. It can slide under a piece of food, or it can press into it, and then lift. It can hold a piece steady, and guide it. It can rest for a moment on the plate, or on the edge of a bowl, and then be lifted again. These movements are not large. They are short and repeated. Lift, pause, lower. Lift, pause, lower. Over time the hand learns the movement and repeats it without effort. A fork often pauses. It pauses when a bite is finished, and it rests on the plate. It pauses when someone reaches for a glass of water. It pauses when someone talks, and holds the fork in the air for a moment, then sets it down. The fork can lie across the plate edge for a short rest. It can sit in a bowl, partly hidden by food. Then it is lifted again. After a meal, the fork moves toward washing. It is set on a plate, and plates move toward the sink. Forks collect with other forks. They slide into water, or they wait on a counter. Some are rinsed quickly. Some are left with residue. This is not always the same. Water rises and falls around them, then they are washed. They meet water, detergent, and heat again and again. Then they dry and return to storage. In many homes, stainless steel is the most common material for everyday forks. Stainless steel forks can last many years to decades with normal care. This may vary. Some forks are silver-plated. Some forks are plastic, and those may be disposable, used once or a few times. This may vary. Some forks are bamboo or wood, and those are less common. Some forks are titanium, and those are less common. Some forks are sporks, a hybrid. Even with these differences, the job stays simple. Pick up, hold, guide, and set down again. A fork does not need much attention to function. It is picked up, angled, and set down. It rests. It moves again. It returns to washing. It returns to the drawer. A fork is one of the most repeated objects in a home, not because it is special, but because it is used in short movements and then it rests again. Recap: it is picked up, it is held, it is set down again. Chapter 2: Where it lives in the home. Most forks live in a cutlery drawer, close to plates. The drawer opens and closes with a simple motion. Inside, forks rest in rows and stacks. Many drawers use a tray with compartments, and forks nest together in their usual space. Nesting means they stack closely with others in a drawer. The same shape repeats, day after day, in a calm line. Sometimes the drawer is tidy, with each fork resting in the same direction. Sometimes the drawer is mixed, with forks crossing and turning. This may vary. Some homes use an overflow bin, a kitchen overflow bin where extra utensils are placed without much sorting. Some homes use an open container, an utensil caddy, where forks stand upright. A caddy changes how forks dry and how air moves around them, and how often they are handled. A fork also has temporary homes. One temporary home is a dishwasher basket. In a dishwasher, forks are placed into a basket, and the basket becomes a small grid of metal shapes. Forks may be separated or mixed. Forks may be placed handle down or handle up. This is not always the same. They stand close together and wait for water and detergent. After washing, they may move to a drying rack. In a drying rack, forks stand together again, and water beads collect and slide. Drips fall quietly. Later, the forks are moved back to the drawer. A fork can also live in a picnic box, or in a travel container, or in a lunch kit. A reusable camping fork can stay with bags or boxes, and it may be rinsed lightly or wiped after use, then returned to the container. This may vary. Plastic disposable forks can be stored in bulk packs, often in a drawer pile, and they may be used for takeout, then thrown away. This may vary. Forks also get misplaced. Misplacement is a quiet part of fork life. A fork can travel to a desk and rest on a napkin. It can be left nearby and return later. Or it may not return quickly. A fork can end up near a couch, on a small surface, then be found later dry and light. A fork can travel in a bag and return days later. This may vary. When forks move around like this, a set can become short by one, and then short by another, and replacement pieces sometimes appear in the drawer later. Even when a fork moves through many places, the loop is simple. The fork leaves the drawer. It meets a plate. It meets the sink. It meets water. It dries. It returns. Some days the loop is quick. Some days it pauses longer at the sink or in a drying rack. Some days it goes on a small trip to a desk or a bag. Then it comes back and becomes still again in its usual space. Recap: it leaves the drawer, and it returns to the drawer. Chapter 3: How it is held and moved. The fork is held in the hand with a light pinch and a wrap of fingers. The thumb helps guide it. The handle rests against the fingers, and the hand learns a familiar position. This grip is simple, and it often stays the same for years without thought. The fork feels cool at first touch, then warms slightly in the hand. A fork moves with small changes in wrist angle. The wrist turns a little, then becomes still. The fork lifts, pauses, and lowers. It can hover for a moment while a bite is considered, then it moves forward. It can rest on the plate again. It can be lifted again. The movement is often a quiet loop that fits into the rhythm of eating. Between bites, the fork can rest. It can rest on the plate with the prongs pointing inward or outward. This is not always the same. It can rest on the rim of a plate, balance for a moment. It can rest on the edge of a bowl. It can be held in the hand while someone looks away, then set down gently. It can be held while reaching for water, then returned to the plate. Sometimes a fork switches hands. This may vary. In some homes and for some people, the fork stays in one hand, meal after meal. In other moments, it may shift. The fork does not mind. It still lifts, holds, and guides. The handle still sits in the fingers. The prongs still touch food. The movement remains small. During eating, the fork meets different textures of food. It can press into something firm, and it can hold something soft. It can pick up small pieces. It can hold a piece steady. It can guide food toward the mouth, then return to rest. The fork may sometimes be held while talking, paused in the air, then set down again as if nothing happened. The fork is also set down repeatedly. It is set down on a plate, on a napkin, on a counter. It is set down in a sink. It is set down in a dishwasher basket. These are simple actions. The fork is lifted, the fork is angled, the fork is set down again. The steadiness of that cycle is part of what makes the fork feel predictable. Recap: lift, pause, lower, and rest. Chapter 4: The fork in a place setting. A fork often appears as part of a place setting. A place setting is the utensils and dishware placed for one person. A fork sits beside a plate in a predictable position, and it waits there until it is needed. In many homes, the pattern repeats. Plate in the center. Fork beside it. Knife and spoon nearby. The fork is part of the group. In some settings, forks are placed on one side of the plate, and often that position is repeated each time. This may vary. The key feeling is that the fork is placed in a steady spot, aligned in a calm row when more than one place setting is made. The alignment can be neat, with handles close to the same line. Or it can be casual, with small differences. This is not always the same. Some households have a fully matching set. Set matching means keeping forks the same style and length. A matching set looks uniform at the table, and pieces tend to nest neatly in the drawer. In other households, the set is mixed. One fork looks slightly different. It is still used. It becomes normal. Over time, the drawer can become a record of small changes, with a few different shapes living together. Forks can also be chosen by type. A dinner fork is familiar and steady for main meals. A salad fork is slightly smaller for light meals or sides. A dessert fork is smaller and can feel gentle to hold. A serving fork holds larger portions from serving bowls. A carving fork can hold larger food steady while serving. A seafood fork can have a narrow reach and can be misplaced. A cocktail fork is small and tidy, and it can disappear into mixed cutlery. A pastry fork works with delicate textures. A kid's fork is sized for small hands. These names exist, and households may use them in different ways. This may vary. When a table is set, forks may be counted by hand. People often count forks only when guests arrive. The forks are placed beside plates, and they wait. One extra fork is sometimes added for serving, or for an extra place. This may vary. The important part is the calm appearance. A fork sits beside a plate. It looks ready, but it is still. Then a hand reaches, and the fork begins its small repeated motions. Recap: it waits beside the plate, ready to be lifted. Chapter 5: Slow history as gradual adjustment. The fork story is often described as a slow one, with changes that happen gradually. Some early handheld food tools were simple pointed tools used to hold or lift food. This may vary. The reason for such tools can be simple, like cleaner handling and a steadier grip, with less direct contact with food. Two-pronged forks are described as being used for serving in some regions. This is not always the same. Fork use is also described as spreading gradually in parts of Europe. This may vary. Over time, more consistent fork shapes are described as emerging, with prong count and size becoming more predictable. This may vary. In some descriptions, 3 and 4 prongs become common, and more prongs can improve grip on smaller pieces of food. This may vary. Forks are also described as becoming part of matched sets. This may vary. When forks are produced in sets with consistent patterns and lengths, it can make table setting more uniform, and it can make replacement easier. Industrial production is described as increasing uniformity, with machine stamping and forming increasing output and consistency. This may vary. The focus is often on sameness, so that one fork feels like another fork in the same set. Stainless steel is described as becoming widespread for everyday forks. This may vary. The idea is that rust resistance improves compared to many older steels, and care becomes easier, with less polishing and better tolerance of wet storage. Dishwashers are described as influencing design and finishes, as heat and detergent exposure become routine in many homes. This may vary. Over time, more specialized forks are described as appearing more easily in mass markets, like salad forks and dessert forks and serving forks. This may vary. Disposable forks are described as expanding in events and takeout, with plastic forks becoming common in short-use settings. This may vary. Alternative materials are described as appearing more often, like bamboo or wood composites and other options, shaped by different cost targets and different disposal systems. This may vary. Modern quality control is described as tightening on alignment and finish, checking prong alignment and surface consistency more reliably. This may vary. Replacement piece shopping is described as becoming normal, with people replacing single forks rather than entire sets. This may vary. Storage accessories are described as becoming common, like drawer trays and caddies that shape how forks are organized. This may vary. Even when details vary across places and times, the quiet feeling stays the same. The fork becomes a normal part of eating. It becomes part of the drawer, part of the table, and part of the wash. Small changes settle into habits. The fork keeps doing the same small job with a steady shape and a steady routine. Recap: small changes settle into everyday habits. Chapter 6: Everyday meals, repeated scenes. A fork appears in many small meals, and the scenes repeat with only small variations. In the morning, a drawer opens. A fork is selected. It is carried to a bowl or plate. It is set down again. The movement can be so familiar that it feels automatic. The fork lifts small pieces. It pauses. It returns to the plate. It lifts again. That loop can happen many times, quietly. Sometimes the fork is chosen for a small bowl, and sometimes for a larger plate. This may vary. The fork can rest beside the bowl, then lift again. It can move in a simple pattern that does not change much. The fork lifts, then pauses. The fork lowers, then rests. The fork lifts again. The repetition is part of why the fork feels so ordinary. At lunch, a fork can travel farther from the kitchen. It can rest on a napkin at a desk. It is used, then left nearby. It returns later, or it does not. This may vary. Sometimes the fork is brought back to the sink quickly. Sometimes it is left on a small surface, then collected later. Sometimes it is placed in a cup and found later in the day. The fork can be the usual one without anyone naming it. It simply becomes part of a small routine. In the evening, forks may be placed beside plates as part of a table setting. They align in a calm row. One extra is sometimes added. This may vary. During dinner, forks collect on plates. Plates move to the sink. Forks slide into water or onto a counter. The sink becomes a staging area. Some forks are rinsed quickly. Some are left with residue. Water rises and falls around them. They wait. Then there is the washing step. In a dishwasher, forks are placed into a basket and they stand in a small grid. They may be separated or mixed. They may be handle down or handle up. This is not always the same. Water sprays, detergent lifts film, and heat helps finish the cycle. After that, forks may be unloaded and placed into the drawer, and the same shapes nest again. Forks can stack neatly, then scatter during unloading, then nest again in their compartments. In hand washing, the routine is also simple. A fork is held under warm water. Soap is applied, a mild detergent designed to lift grease and food film. A sponge or cloth moves along the length. The fork is rinsed and set aside. Sometimes forks are soaked, left in water to loosen residue. Soaking can lower scrubbing force and can reduce scratching. This may vary. After washing, forks stand in a drying rack. Water beads collect and slide. Drips fall. Later, forks return to the drawer. The set itself rotates. Some forks are used often. Some remain at the bottom of the drawer for long periods. The same fork might be reached for again and again because it sits on top. Another fork might rarely be used. This may vary. Over time, one fork may look slightly different, and it is still used, and it becomes normal. A mismatch is accepted. The routine continues. There are also quiet moments of misuse. A fork can be used for prying at a sealed edge. Pressure increases. The fork bends slightly. Then it is set down as if nothing happened. A fork can be used for stirring thick mixtures. The prongs resist movement. The handle twists. Then the fork is rinsed and put away. These moments are not dramatic. They are small and practical, and they can leave tiny changes in shape over time. Snacks and leftovers can also bring small scenes. A fork is used from a container. It lifts a few bites. Then it is set down. A late-night fork can be used quietly, then left to return later. This may vary. The scenes change, but the fork repeats. Drawer to table. Table to sink. Sink to wash. Wash to drawer. The loop stays calm. Recap. The scene changes, but the fork repeats. Chapter 7. Small sounds and small contacts. A fork makes small contacts during use. It touches a plate, and there may be a soft tap, then quiet again. It slides against a bowl, and there is a small sound that depends on the dish material. The sound of a fork changes with ceramic, glass, or metal bowls. This may vary. Many times the sound is so small that it is barely noticed. A fork often taps a plate once, then becomes quiet again. Friction is the resistance when the fork slides against food or a plate. Friction affects how quietly it moves and how controlled it feels. The surface finish of a fork can change this slightly. A polished finish is shiny and smooth. It can rinse easily, but it can show smudges and small scratches. A satin or matte finish is less shiny, with a soft look. It can hide smudges, but fine residue can sit in the texture. A brushed finish has fine lines, and it can hide scratches, but the lines can collect residue if not rinsed well. These are quiet differences that can be seen in certain light and felt in small ways. In a drawer, forks form small repeated lines. When the drawer closes, the forks become still. When the drawer opens, the forks shift slightly and touch each other. There can be a small sound of metal against metal. Then a fork is taken, and the rest settle again. When forks are unloaded from a dishwasher basket, they can clink softly as they are lifted and placed into a tray. Then the sound stops, and they become still again. Water changes the fork's feel. A fork can look different when wet versus dry. Water can bead on the surface, and a fork can dry with a bead of water held between prongs. A small bead can sit there and reflect light, then slide, then fall. In a drying rack, drips fall quietly. When water dries on a fork, water spots can remain, especially in hard water areas. Water spots are dried mineral marks left after water evaporates. This may vary. The spots can change appearance and can feel slightly rough until wiped. These small sounds and small contacts are part of normal handling. They happen without attention. The fork simply moves where the hand guides it. It touches, it taps, it slides, and then it becomes quiet again. Recap: a small touch, a small sound, and then stillness. Chapter 8. The fork among other utensils. Forks rarely live alone. They share drawers with other utensils, like spoons and knives. They share the wash cycle. They share the table. Cutlery is the group of eating tools, usually forks, knives, and spoons. Flatway is another common word for cutlery, especially metal sets. A fork sits among these pieces, and it is chosen as part of a set, not as a single item. Sets are bought and kept, and then slowly change. Set matching is one goal for some households, keeping forks the same style and length. But forks also disappear quietly. Misplacement happens. A fork ends up outside the usual storage spot. It travels to a desk or a bag, then returns later. Or it does not return. This may vary. Over time, the drawer can lose a fork, then lose another. A replacement piece can appear, bought to fill a missing spot in a set. Then the drawer becomes slightly mixed again. The fork that remains can become the usual fork, simply because it is there. Another fork might look slightly different and still be used. One odd fork can become normal. It can sit among the others and do the same job. People may notice mismatches at the table, and then they stop noticing. This may vary. The routine continues because the fork still lifts and holds and guides. When guests arrive, the group becomes more noticeable. People often count forks only when guests arrive. They count pieces in the drawer, and they check how many place settings they can make. If the count feels short, an odd fork might be added from an overflow bin, or a different fork might be used. This may vary. The fork still works the same way. It rests beside a plate, waiting to be lifted, then it returns to washing with the group. Forks are washed in groups, not one at a time. They are stored in groups, nested together. They share rubbing and small marks. They share the same water and detergent. They share the same drying rack. They share the same return to the drawer. The fork stays in the group and keeps its role day after day. Recap: it stays in the group and it keeps its role. Chapter 9: Storage Habits and Drawer Geography. Storage creates a small map in a home. Forks have a usual zone in the drawer, and that zone can feel like their main home. The tray compartments guide placement. Forks nest together, and they touch, then become still. In some drawers, the main compartment holds the dinner forks. Another compartment holds smaller forks. This may vary. In other drawers, everything is mixed together. The fork still finds its way back into the pile. There can be a back corner of the drawer where odd pieces collect. There can be an overflow bin where extra forks and mixed utensils lie. There can be an utensil caddy on a counter where forks stand upright for quick reach. There can be a dishwasher basket that holds forks temporarily during washing. There can be a drying rack where forks pause while water beads slide and drip. There can be a picnic box or a travel kit container where a fork waits for an outdoor meal. These are all small places a fork can belong, depending on a home's habits. This may vary. A fork also has temporary spots that happen during busy moments. A fork can be set on a counter for a moment, then moved to the sink. A fork can be left on a plate, then carried to the sink with other dishes. Forks tend to collect in the sink after busy meals. They can sit in water, or sit on the edge, or sit in a small pile. This is not always the same. Some forks are rinsed soon after use, especially after salty or acidic foods. Some forks are left with residue, and dried oils and food film can sit in prong gaps. This may vary. The fork then moves from staging to washing. It may be rinsed. It may be soaked. It may be washed with warm water and mild detergent. It may be cleaned with a soft sponge or cloth to reduce scratches. These are gentle routines. What people usually do instead can be different. They may leave forks in the sink with residue. They may put them straight into the dishwasher without rinsing. They may let them air dry in a crowded rack. This may vary. Either way, the fork eventually dries and returns to storage. This storage loop is easy to picture because it is repeated so often. Drawer to table. Table to sink. Sink to wash. Wash to drawer. The fork moves through these zones in a slow loop. Even when the fork is misplaced, it often returns, and it becomes part of the map again. The drawer closes, and the fork becomes still. Recap: drawer, table, sink, wash, and drawer again. Chapter 10: A gentle recap of living with the fork. Now we can slow down and stay with the simplest summary. The fork's main job is steady holding and lifting. It is a handheld eating utensil with multiple short prongs used to pick up, hold, and guide food during eating and serving. The fork does not need drama. It does not need attention. It simply does the same job in small repeated motions. The fork's main place is close to meals. It often lives in a cutlery drawer near plates. It also pauses in a dishwasher basket, in a drying rack, or in an utensil caddy. It can travel to a desk, a couch, or a bag, then return later. This may vary. Even when it travels, it usually finds its way back into the home's small map of storage. The fork's main movement is small. It is held in the hand with a light pinch and wrap of fingers. The wrist makes small angle changes. Lift, pause, lower. The fork rests on a plate edge, then moves again. The sound of the fork can change with ceramic, glass, or metal bowls. This may vary. Many contacts are small, and then there is stillness. The fork meets water often. It meets detergent. It meets heat. It may be rinsed soon, or left with residue. This is not always the same. It may be washed by hand, or in a dishwasher. It may be towel dried to reduce water spots, or air dried in a rack. This may vary. Over time, fine scratches from nesting and washing can appear. Water spots can appear if air dried with hard water. Shine can dull slightly over years. The fork still works. And the fork returns. It returns to the drawer. It nests with other forks. It becomes one repeated line among other repeated lines. It is picked up, it is held, it is set down again. It is picked up, it is held, it is set down again. The loop is quiet, and it is steady, and it continues. Recap: it is picked up, it is held, it is set down again. Chapter 11: Choosing the material. A fork begins with a material choice, and the most common everyday choice is stainless steel. Stainless steel is chosen because it resists rust in normal kitchen moisture, and because it is strong enough for repeated use. It also accepts polished or matte finishes, and it has a reasonable cost at scale. Those are quiet reasons, and they fit the quiet life of a fork. Stainless steel is durable, moderately heavy, and stiff. It has low porosity, and it is generally smooth. It tolerates heat well, which matters because forks meet hot foods, and they also meet heat during washing. Friction is moderate and can depend on the finish. A polished surface can feel smooth in motion. A more matte surface can feel slightly different against fingers and water. This may vary. In daily use, a stainless steel fork often feels cool at first touch, then it warms slightly in the hand. The weight feels steady, and that steadiness can make control feel simple and calm. When it glides on plates, there can be a small sound, and the sound depends on the dish material. Ceramic can sound different from glass, and glass can sound different from metal. This may vary. The fork is still doing the same thing, and the sound passes quickly. A fork can also be made from silver-plated metal. Silver-plated forks are chosen for a traditional appearance and set style. They can feel smooth and familiar in the hand. The plating layer is thin and can wear. Heat tolerance is generally fine for warm foods, but dishwashing can be harder on plating. This is not always the same. In daily use, silver-plated forks are often smooth, and sometimes they can feel slightly softer than some steels. The surface can show fingerprints and dulling, and tarnish or dulling can appear over time. Wear can show on high contact areas, especially edges and tips. If plating thins, base metal can show, and uneven cleaning can lead to patchy discoloration. This may vary. Plastic is another option, often disposable, sometimes reusable. Plastic forks are chosen for very low cost per piece, lightweight for transport, and the fact that there is no rust and no polishing. Plastic has low weight and lower stiffness, and it can be more flexible. It can deform with heat. This may vary. The surface can hold odor or oil film depending on plastic type. In the hand, plastic can feel light and less steady. Texture can feel slightly grippy or slightly slippery depending on the surface. This may vary. Plastic can bend during firmer foods, and over time it can cloud, scratch, and develop rough edges. It can warp if exposed to heat, like hot liquids or dishwasher heat. This may vary. Even at this first stage, there is a quiet pattern already forming. The fork is chosen for repeated use or chosen for quick use, and the choice shapes everything that comes next. A fork is formed, finished, and checked, and that pattern starts with the material. Recap: the material choice sets the fork's basic feel and lifespan. Chapter 12: Raw stock arriving and being checked. After material selection, raw stock arrives. For a typical stainless steel fork in mass production, the steel can arrive as sheets, coils, or bars. The stock is not yet shaped like a fork. It is still flat or long and plain, and it is waiting for the next step. When the stock arrives, it can already carry small imperfections. There can be surface scuffs. There can be edge burrs. Burrs are small, rough, raised edges left from cutting or handling. They can be sharp, and they can catch on gloves or cloth. This may vary. The stock can also have slight composition variation between batches. That is a quiet kind of difference, and it might not show in a glance. This may vary. Before shaping begins, checks can happen. Thickness and surface inspection can happen, looking for consistency. A review of certification and sample verification can be part of it. This may vary. The idea is simple. The material is checked before it becomes thousands of forks. The goal is to avoid carrying avoidable problems forward. If the raw stock is uneven, then the fork can be uneven later. If the surface is heavily scratched, then finishing later can take more work. This may vary. This stage is calm because it is mostly waiting and looking. The metal sits in stacks or rolls. It is moved to the next station. It is positioned. It is aligned. It is set down. The motions are steady and repeated, like the motions of the fork later when it moves from drawer to table. Even here, there is routine. When the stock is handled, edges matter. Edges can have burrs. Those burrs can be removed later. Some marks can be acceptable. Some marks are not. This may vary. The checks are meant to keep the process quiet, so the later fork is quiet too. The steel is not yet a fork, but it already begins to resemble one in one way. It is part of a set of pieces that are meant to match. Matching begins early, by keeping thickness and surface consistent enough that a fork can be formed, finished, and checked, and then match others in a set. Recap: the raw metal is inspected so later forks can be more consistent. Chapter 13: Blanking and stamping into a fork-shaped blank. When the stock is ready, a fork-shaped blank is punched from the sheet. This step is called blanking or stamping. It is one of the big changes, because it is the moment the shape becomes recognizable. Before this, the metal is only metal. After this, the outline looks like a fork. The blank is not yet smooth and finished. It can carry burrs. The edges can be slightly uneven. It can look rough around the outline. That roughness is normal for this stage. The fork is still early in its journey. It is not meant to be pretty yet. It is meant to be correct enough in outline that the next steps can refine it. Quality checks can focus on outline accuracy and burr limits. The outline needs to match the intended pattern. The blank needs to match the expected shape and size. This may vary. Burr limits matter because later steps must remove burrs, and too much burr can mean more work and more risk of roughness. That is a small detail, but it matters because forks are held in hands, and fingers notice roughness. After blanking, the pieces can move in batches. Many blanks can be stacked. The stack can look like a repeating silhouette. The pieces touch each other. They rub lightly. They settle. This is part of why fine scratches can start early. This may vary. Later finishing can reduce the look of some scratches, but some rubbing can become part of the fork's life. Even here, the pattern is steady. The blank is formed, then it is finished later, then it is checked. The factory rhythm is repetitive and predictable. The blank becomes a shape, the shape becomes more precise, the edges become softer, and the surface becomes smoother. At this stage, the fork has a handle outline and a head outline, but the head does not yet have prongs. It is still one piece. It is still flat. It is waiting for shaping. It is waiting for the careful steps that make the fork feel right in the hand and feel straight on a plate. Recap: the blank looks like a fork outline even before prongs exist. Chapter 14: Trimming to clean edges. After the blank is stamped, trimming can happen. Trimming means extra material is cut away to create cleaner edges. It is a refining step. It does not change the idea of a fork. It improves the outline that already exists. During trimming, small sharp edges can remain. There can be an uneven trim line. This may vary. The trimming tool can leave tiny changes along the edge, and those changes can later become places that need smoothing. The goal is to move toward edges that feel consistent. Quality checks can look at edge consistency and size tolerance. Size tolerance is a way of saying the size stays within an acceptable range for matching. The fork needs to match other forks in the set. This means length and width cannot drift too much. This may vary. A set needs to feel uniform at the table, and that starts with the shape being close enough from piece to piece. Trimming can feel like quiet housekeeping. The fork outline is made clean. The fork outline is made repeatable. Each piece becomes closer to the same as the next piece. A fork that will later nest with others must also match them, so they stack cleanly in trays and fit in drawer compartments. At this stage, the fork is still flat, and the handle and head are still not yet formed into their final curves. But the shape becomes calmer. It becomes less sharp at the edges. It becomes easier to handle. It becomes easier to move from station to station without snagging. A fork is a handheld utensil, and the hand will notice edge sharpness. If an edge is too sharp, it can feel unpleasant. If an edge is rough, it can trap residue later. This may vary. That is why trimming and edge control matter. Even before the fork is shaped, the edge begins to move toward a safe and comfortable feel. The rhythm continues. Formed, finished, checked. The fork is being formed in its outline. It will be finished more later. It will be checked again and again along the way. Recap: trimming helps the outline become cleaner and more consistent. Chapter 15: Heat conditioning and cleaning the surface. After trimming, there can be a step of annealing or heat conditioning. This may vary. In this kind of step, the metal is heated and cooled to reduce internal stress. Internal stress is a kind of tension inside the metal that can affect how it bends or holds shape later. Heating and cooling can help the metal behave more predictably when it is formed. This step can bring its own small imperfections. There can be discoloration. There can be scale, a surface change from heating. This may vary. Quality checks can look at hardness range and surface condition. Hardness range means the metal is not too soft and not too hard for the next steps. This may vary. After heating, there can be pickling or descaling. This may vary. The idea is to remove surface oxides chemically or mechanically. Oxides are surface layers that can form, and they can interfere with finishing. During pickling or descaling, uneven cleaning can happen. There can be minor etching. This may vary. Quality checks can look at cleanliness and surface uniformity, so the next shaping and finishing steps start with a surface that can be made smooth. Even when these steps vary by factory, the calm purpose is the same. Make the metal ready for forming. Make the surface ready for finishing. Keep the piece predictable so it can match others. These steps can be quiet because they are not about the visible fork yet. They are about the metal behaving well. They are about reducing surprises later. They support the final fork feeling straight, stiff enough, and pleasant to hold. It is also a moment to remember that different materials behave differently. Stainless steel tolerates heat well. Silver-plated pieces may need more care with heat and detergent later. Plastic can deform with heat. This may vary. The manufacturing path depends on what the fork is meant to be and how it is meant to be used. The steady refrain still applies. Formed, finished, checked. The fork is being prepared. The fork is being cleaned. The fork is being made ready for the steps that shape the handle and the head. Recap: heat and cleaning steps can make the metal behave more predictably. Chapter 16: Forming the handle profile. Now the handle begins to take its final shape. Presses can form curves, thickness transitions, and the handle shape itself. The handle can become flat, or rounded, or tapered, depending on the design. This may vary. The handle is the part that meets the hand, so this shaping is important for comfort. During forming, slight warps can appear. There can be uneven bends. This may vary. The metal is being asked to change shape, and it does not always do so perfectly at the first try. Quality checks can look for straightness, symmetry, and overall length. Straightness matters because a fork that looks twisted can feel wrong in use. Symmetry matters because matching sets should look calm together. Thickness transitions can matter too. The handle can feel thick or thin. Thickness affects stiffness and weight. A thicker fork can feel stable, and a thinner fork can feel light but may flex. This may vary. Weight distribution can also change. A fork can feel head-heavy or handle-heavy. A head-heavy balance can guide food, and a handle-heavy balance can rest differently on plates. This may vary. These are quiet design choices, and forming helps make them real. As the handle forms, the fork begins to feel more like an object meant to be held. It is still not finished. It can still be rough on the surface. But the curve of the handle can begin to match the curve of fingers. It can begin to sit in the hand in a natural way. The handle can also carry patterning or embossing later. Patterning is raised or recessed detail. It can affect grip and set identity. Patterns can also trap residue, which can require more careful washing. This may vary. Even if patterning is not added, the handle shape itself can influence cleaning. Deep contours can hold water or residue. Wide handles can dry slower in crowded racks. This may vary. At this stage, the fork is still moving through machines and hands. It is picked up and set down. It is positioned and aligned. It travels in batches. The factory routine mirrors the later home routine in a quieter way. The fork is formed, finished, checked, and moved on. Recap: the handle is shaped for comfort, balance, and matching sets. Chapter 17: Forming the fork head. After the handle, the head is formed. The front end is shaped for prong layout and angle. It begins to become the part that touches food. The head needs to be aligned correctly because the prongs will be cut from it. During this forming, there can be a slight twist or an uneven head angle. This may vary. A small twist can make the fork feel wrong on a plate, and it can change how food sits on it. Quality checks can look at head alignment and angle measurement. The goal is for the fork head to sit in a predictable plane, so the prongs will line up evenly later. Head width matters, too. A wider head can hold more food on the front. A narrower head can feel more precise. This may vary. Wider heads can trap more residue between prongs, simply because there is more area and more contact points. Tight spaces can hold film longer. This may vary. These are small trade-offs that designers consider, and the forming step helps keep the intended width and angle. The head is also where prong count will show. Many forks have 3 or 4 prongs. This may vary. Prong count changes contact points with food. More prongs can hold better. Fewer prongs can clean faster. This may vary. Even before prongs exist, the head shape is being prepared for the number and spacing that will come. This stage is still calm and mechanical. The fork head is pressed. The metal moves. The shape settles. The piece is checked. If it needs correction, it can be corrected later in straightening. This may vary. The point is to keep moving toward a fork that looks straight and feels straight. The fork is still not polished. It may still carry marks from earlier steps. But the overall shape is becoming clear. The handle has a profile. The head has an angle. The fork is becoming what it will be, one calm change at a time. Recap: the head is shaped so prongs can later be cut and aligned. Chapter 18: Cutting slots to create prongs. Now the prongs are created. Channels are cut to separate the prongs. This step can be called prong cutting or slotting. It changes the head from one piece into several prongs that can hold food. This step can create imperfections. There can be rough slots. There can be unequal spacing. This may vary. Burrs can appear inside the slots, where metal is cut. Quality checks can look at spacing, depth, and burr presence. Spacing matters because spacing affects how food slips or holds. Tight spacing can grip small foods. Wider spacing can release easier. This may vary. Spacing also affects cleaning. Tight spacing can hold residue longer and can need more rinsing attention. Depth matters because the slots must be deep enough to define prongs, but not so deep that structure becomes weak. This may vary. Burrs matter because burrs can scratch plates and can feel rough to fingers. Burrs can also trap residue. This may vary. The goal is a clean slot that becomes easy to rinse later. At this stage, the fork begins to look fully like a fork. The prongs exist, even if they are not yet tapered or rounded at the tips. The fork can now perform the basic idea of picking up and holding, though it is still not ready for use. It is still in the middle of forming. It still needs finishing. The calm rhythm stays. The fork is formed and then refined. It is checked and then refined again. Each station does a small job. Each job reduces roughness, reduces unevenness, and improves alignment. The prongs also introduce new checks. Tip alignment tolerance matters later because prongs need to line up. If one prong sits higher or lower, it can feel wrong when the fork meets food. This may vary. Evenness helps rinsing, too, because aligned prongs allow water to flow in a more even way. This is one of the steps where the fork's future cleaning is already being shaped. The spaces between prongs can trap food film. Tight spaces can trap more. This may vary. Designers consider this, and manufacturing tries to keep spacing consistent. The fork's quiet home routine is already being built into the metal. Recap: slots create prongs, and spacing affects both grip and rinsing. Chapter 19: Shaping and tapering the prongs. After prongs are cut, prongs are shaped and tapered. The prongs can be pressed and ground to final shape. Taper means the prongs become narrower toward the tips, in a controlled way. This shaping affects how the fork meets food and how it feels against a plate. Imperfections can still appear. There can be uneven tip thickness. There can be slight asymmetry. This may vary. Quality checks can look at tip profile, alignment, and consistent taper. A consistent taper means each prong narrows in a similar way, so they look uniform and feel uniform. Tip shape and rounding matters. Sharper tips can penetrate food easier. Rounder tips can feel softer. This may vary. Rough tips can hold film. Tips also touch plates, and smoothness affects how gently a fork lands on ceramic. This may vary. A fork that feels smooth can feel calmer in use. Prong length matters as well. Longer prongs can reach deeper into food, but longer prongs can also bend more. Shorter prongs can feel stable but have less reach. This may vary. Longer prongs can hide residue near the base, especially where the prongs meet the head. Tight corners can hold a little film. This may vary. As prongs are shaped, the fork can begin to show its final identity. A dinner fork is familiar size and steady. A salad fork is slightly smaller in reach. A dessert fork is small and offers gentle control. A kid's fork is designed for small hands, with an easier grip. This may vary. These differences can come from length, head width, prong length, and handle shape, all of which are being refined in this stage and nearby stages. The fork is still not finished on the surface. The shaping step is more about geometry, about the way the prongs align in space. But geometry affects feel. If prongs are even, the fork feels straight. If prongs are uneven, it can feel odd. This may vary. Alignment also affects how evenly a fork rinses. If one prong sits out of plane, water might pool or cling differently. This may vary. The quiet refrain continues, because it fits here very well. Formed, finished, checked. Shaped, refined, checked. The fork is not rushed. It becomes correct through small repeated attention. Recap: taper and rounding make prongs feel smoother and more consistent. Chapter 20: Edge rounding, straightening, and making it feel safe. After shaping, edges are softened. Edge rounding can happen through tumbling or finishing. The goal is to remove sharpness. A fork is held by fingers, and it touches mouths and lips, and it touches plates. Edges need to feel safe and calm. Imperfections can still happen. There can be missed sharp spots. There can be inconsistent rounding. This may vary. Quality checks can include touch inspection and edge radius sampling. Touch inspection means a person or a check method confirms edges do not feel sharp. Edge radius sampling means the curve of the edge is checked in a simple way. This may vary. Then straightening can happen. Straightening means correcting twist and bend. Forks can pick up twist during forming, and they can pick up small bends during prong shaping. Straightening pushes the fork back toward flatness and alignment. Imperfections can happen here too. There can be overcorrection. There can be slight remaining warp. This may vary. Quality checks can look at flatness and prong alignment gauges. Gauges are tools used to compare shape to expected shape. This may vary. This stage is calm and practical. It is about removing the small discomforts that a hand would feel. It is about making sure the fork looks straight and feels straight. A fork that feels straight is more relaxing to use. It sits on a plate without rocking. It meets food evenly. It rinses evenly. This may vary. It is also about preparing for the surface finish. Surface finishing will show scratches and warps. If the fork is not straight before finishing, the finish can make the problem more visible. This may vary. So straightening fits naturally here before polish or satin or brush finishes are applied. Edge rounding also supports cleaning. Rough edges can hold film. Rounded edges can wipe clean with fewer passes. This may vary. Deep patterns can trap residue, but smooth edges can help overall cleaning feel simpler. In a quiet sense, this is the stage where the fork begins to feel like it belongs in a home. It begins to feel like it could rest in a drawer without snagging cloth. It begins to feel like it could be picked up without surprise. The factory is building the same predictability that the home routine depends on. Recap: edges are softened and the fork is straightened for comfort and consistency. Chapter 20: Surface finishing, washing, and optional details. Now the surface finish is created. Abrasives and buffers can produce a polished, satin, or brushed surface. Each finish changes micro-texture. Polished surfaces can look shiny, and they can rinse easily, but they can show smudges and small scratches. Satin finishes can hide marks better, but they can hold film in the micro-texture. Brushed surfaces can show fine lines, and they may need extra rinsing to clear film. This may vary. Surface finishing can also introduce imperfections. There can be swirl marks. There can be uneven sheen. This may vary. Quality checks can include visual inspection under consistent lighting. The goal is a surface that looks uniform enough that a set feels matched. After finishing, washing and drying can remove oils and dust. Pieces are washed to remove residue from the manufacturing process and then dried. Imperfections can still appear. There can be water spots. There can be trapped abrasive dust. This may vary. Quality checks can include cleanliness and spot checks. Then there can be marking or pattern detail, sometimes optional. Logos or patterns can be stamped or etched. Imperfections can include shallow or uneven marks. Quality checks can look at legibility and placement. This may vary. Patterning can add set identity. It can also trap residue and require more careful washing. This may vary. There can also be a passivation treatment. This may vary. The description is that surface chemistry is stabilized to resist corrosion. Imperfections can include uneven treatment or discoloration. This may vary. Quality checks can include process timing and surface tests. This may vary. At this stage, the fork is nearly what it will be in a drawer. It looks like a finished fork. It feels smooth enough to hold. It is clean enough to be packaged. The finish can already hint at how it will age. Fine scratches from nesting and washing can appear over time. Water spots can appear if air-dried with hard water. Shine can dull slightly over years. This may vary, but the finish is meant to be stable enough for repeated use. This is also where design decisions show up clearly. Handle shape affects grip contact area. Handle width affects how fingers wrap. Edge radius affects comfort during long meals. Set compatibility affects how uniform the table looks. Storage compatibility affects how the fork nests in trays and how easy it is to grab one fork at a time. Tight nesting can save space but increase rubbing. In a dishwasher, tight nesting can reduce spray access. This may vary. Formed, finished, checked, and then washed, dried, and checked again. The rhythm stays calm. Recap: the surface is finished, cleaned, and sometimes marked for set identity. Chapter 20: Final inspection, assembly, shipping, and quiet variations. Near the end, final inspection happens. Forks are checked for shape, finish, and defects. Minor scratches can appear. Prongs can be uneven. Edges can still feel rough in spots. This may vary. Quality checks can use a sampling plan, defect counts, and fit with set pieces. Fit with set pieces matters because forks need to match other forks, and also match knives and spoons in the same set. This may vary. After inspection, counting and set assembly can happen. Forks are grouped into sets or bulk packs. Imperfections can include mismatched pieces and missing counts. Quality checks can include count verification and pattern matching. Then packaging happens. Forks can be wrapped, boxed, and labeled. Imperfections can include scuffs from tight packaging and mislabels. Quality checks can include label accuracy and packaging integrity. Shipping and storage follows. Cartons are stored and moved to retailers. Imperfections can include box crush and moisture exposure. Quality checks can include carton condition and batch traceability. This may vary. The fork is now far from the factory floor and close to the home drawer where it will eventually live. This is also a calm moment to look at fork variants, because by the time forks reach a home, they arrive in different types. A dinner fork is used for main meals. It is a familiar size and feels steady. It tends to fit most trays. A salad fork is used for light meals and sides. It has a slightly smaller reach and nests easily. A dessert fork is used for desserts and fruit. It is small and offers gentle control, and it can often be mixed with teaspoons. A kid's fork is for small hands and has an easier grip, and it can end up in odd drawers. A reusable camping fork is for travel kits. It is light and portable, and it often lives in bags or boxes. These are quiet differences that show up at the table and in storage. There are also serving and specialty forks. A serving fork is used for serving bowls and holds larger portions. It can need deeper drawer space. A carving fork is used for holding roasts and can provide a stable hold on large foods, and it is often stored separately. A seafood fork is used for shellfish and can have a narrow reach, and it is often misplaced. A cocktail fork is used for small bites and is small and tidy, and it can disappear into mixed cutlery. A pastry fork is used with cake and soft desserts and works with delicate textures, and it is usually part of a set. These forks still follow the same manufacturing logic, with design choices shifting length, head width, and prong shape. This may vary. There are disposable and alternative material forks as well. A plastic disposable fork is used for takeout, and it is stored in a drawer pile. A wood or bamboo fork can be used for picnics. It is light and simple, and it can dry out and can splinter. This may vary. A spork is a hybrid and can be used for travel meals, one tool for multiple foods, and it often lives in lunch kits. A titanium fork is less common and can be used in lightweight kits. It can be light and strong, and it is often kept with camping gear. A compostable bioplastic fork is described for events with disposal-oriented use. This may vary. These choices change cleaning ease, durability, and where the fork is stored, but the basic role stays the same: pick up, hold, guide, and rest. If a home chooses forks by size, there are approximate ranges often described. Small forks can be about 12 to 15 centimeters, like cocktail or dessert. Standard forks can be about 18 to 21 centimeters, like dinner or table. Large forks can be about 22 to 30 centimeters, like serving or carving. These are approximate ranges, and this may vary. But even when the size changes, the feeling is still familiar: a handle in the hand, and prongs in front. The calm conclusion of this segment is that the fork becomes a fork through repeated small decisions and repeated small checks. Material selection, then forming, then prong cutting, then smoothing, then finishing, then inspection, then packing. Formed, finished, checked. Then it rests in a drawer and begins the quiet routine of daily use. Recap: the fork is inspected, packed, shipped, and then it becomes part of a home steady routine. Chapter 23: First Days and Early Routines. In the first days, a fork often feels very consistent and very clean. It looks smooth, and it feels smooth, and the surface looks even when it is dry. The fork is washed for the first time, and then it is dried, and then it is placed into a drawer. The fork becomes part of the daily loop almost immediately. The first wash can be simple. Warm water touches the surface, and mild detergent lifts a thin film from handling and storage. A soft sponge or cloth moves over the handle, and then over the head, and then between the prongs. The fork is rinsed, and the water runs away. Then the fork is dried, or it is left to air dry. This may vary. Even in the first wash, the fork begins to learn the home. In some homes, water spots appear often after air drying. In other homes, they appear less often. This may vary. In one home, the fork is wiped dry each time. In another home, the fork rests in a drying rack and dries on its own. The fork accepts the routine it is given. After that first wash, the fork is placed into storage. Many forks go into a cutlery drawer. Some go into a tray with compartments. Some go into a utensil caddy. Some go into a kitchen overflow bin. This may vary. Where it goes first often becomes where it returns later. It becomes a quiet habit, like a path worn into daily movement. Early on, the shine can feel new. A polished finish can look bright, and it can show fingerprints briefly, then those fingerprints fade after washing. A satin or brushed finish can look softer, and it can hide certain marks more easily. This is not always the same. Even within a set, small differences can be noticed only if someone looks closely, and then forgotten again. In the first week, the fork begins to meet the normal choices of a home. Some people rinse soon after use, especially after salty or acidic foods. Some people leave forks in the sink with residue. This is not always the same. Some people put forks straight into the dishwasher without rinsing. Some people wash by hand with warm water and mild detergent. Some people let forks air dry in a crowded rack. Some people dry with a towel to reduce water spots in hard water areas. This may vary. The first tiny marks can appear quickly, but they are faint. Forks are stored nested with other forks, stacked in a tray, or mixed in a container. When metal touches metal in a drawer, thin lines can appear in reflected light. When forks touch in a dishwasher basket, rub marks can appear. When forks touch plates and bowls, tiny contact marks can appear. These changes are usually small enough to ignore. They are only noticed if someone looks for them, and most of the time no one looks. In early days, there can also be an early sense of a matching set. The forks look the same, and they line up neatly. The drawer looks uniform. The table looks uniform. The uniform look can feel calm, even if no one talks about it. Then the fork is used, and washed, and returned again, and the sameness becomes part of the background. Recap: it is washed. It is dried. It returns. Chapter 24: the washing cycle as a repeated environment. Over time, washing becomes the fork's most repeated environment. The fork spends a lot of time meeting water, detergent, heat, and repeated contact with plates. The cycle repeats so often that it becomes a kind of weather for the fork, water moving across the surface, then draining away, then returning again. Warm water contact is common. Water loosens food residue, and it carries away loose particles. Mild detergent helps lift oils and food film. The fork can look clean after a quick rinse, but it can still hold a thin film near the prongs. This may vary. A fork can appear clean and still need a little more time in warm water and mild detergent to fully clear that film. Rinsing is a quiet step, and it matters. Rinsing clears soap and lifts away the loosened film. Water runs down the handle, then off the head, then between the prongs. Drops can cling between prongs. A fork can dry with a bead of water held between prongs. Then the bead can slide and fall, or it can stay until it dries. This may vary. Drying can happen in different ways. Some forks are towel dried to reduce water spots in hard water areas. Towel drying can leave the surface clearer, and it can reduce cloudy dots that appear when hard water dries on the surface. Some forks are left to air dry. Air drying can be easy and hands-off, but it can leave spots if water minerals dry on the surface. This may vary. The drying rack itself becomes a small environment. Forks stand close together, and water beads collect and slide. Drips fall, then stop. In a crowded rack, forks touch, and contact points repeat. This may vary. In a less crowded rack, forks dry with more space around them. The fork does not choose, it simply waits, and then becomes dry. Dishwashers add another layer. Dishwashers bring heat, detergent, and water spray. Forks sit in a dishwasher basket, sometimes clustered too tightly. In many homes, forks are washed in groups, not one at a time. After a busy meal, forks tend to collect in the sink in small piles. They rest against plates and other utensils. Then they move into washing together. In a dishwasher basket, many forks stand close. In hand washing, several forks are rinsed and wiped in a row. The group rhythm can make cleaning feel simple, because the same motions repeat from fork to fork. When forks touch tightly during dishwasher cycles, rub marks can form. The basket can be crowded. The forks can rest against each other, and small contact points repeat in the same places. This may vary. After the cycle, forks are often unloaded in groups. Forks can stack neatly, then scatter during unloading. Then they nest again in the drawer. Washing also sets the pace of wear. Long exposure to salty moisture can degrade a fork faster. Harsh abrasives can scratch finishes. Dishwasher cycles that keep forks touching tightly can cause rub marks. These are not big events. They are small conditions that repeat, and repetition is what matters. The fork surface can look different when wet versus dry. When wet, it can look darker and smoother. When dry, tiny scratches can show in certain light. Water spots can show as cloudy dots. A thin film can show as a faint haze. This is not always the same. Much of it depends on how quickly the fork is rinsed, how it is dried, and how crowded the washing load is. Even with these differences, the washing cycle keeps its calm shape. Water, mild detergent, rinsing, draining, drying, and return. The fork is washed, then it becomes still again. Recap: it is washed, then it becomes still again. Chapter 25: Small marks that gather slowly. A fork surface can record daily life in a very quiet way. The marks are usually thin and ordinary. They appear slowly, and they often become invisible to the mind, even when they remain on the metal. A fork shine can slowly soften over time, and it happens without any clear moment. One source of marks is drawer rubbing. Forks are often stored nested with other forks. In a drawer, forks form small repeated lines. When a drawer opens, forks can shift slightly. When a drawer closes, forks settle. Over time, nesting and small movement can leave fine scratching on the handle. The early sign can be thin lines that only show in reflected light. Later, the set can look slightly dulled overall. This may vary. Sometimes the marks are not even on the handle, but on the head, where forks touch each other in a stack. When forks are placed back into a tray quickly, one fork can slide over another, and the contact repeats day after day. A drawer can be tidy, or it can be mixed. This may vary. A tidy drawer can still create rubbing marks, because nesting is close. A mixed drawer can create different kinds of rubbing, because pieces cross and scrape. Another source of marks is dishwasher basket contact. In a dishwasher, forks sometimes cluster too tightly. Tight contact in the basket can cause rub marks. The marks may appear where one fork touches another, especially at the head or along the handle. The marks can look like small bright lines or small dull spots, depending on the finish. This may vary. Plates and bowls also contribute. The sound of a fork changes with ceramic, glass, or metal bowls, and the contact also changes. A fork often taps a plate once, then becomes quiet again. Repeated contact with plates and hard surfaces can lead to fine marks, and over long time it can lead to tip blunting. Tip blunting can begin as a feeling that the tips are less precise. Later, it can mean it is harder to spear firmer foods. Avoiding scraping hard surfaces can reduce how quickly this happens. This may vary. Different finishes show marks differently. A polished finish can show smudges and scratches more clearly. A satin finish can hide some marks, because it already has a softer texture. A brushed finish can hide some scratches, but it can also make new lines blend into existing lines. This may vary. Some forks gain fine scratches that only show in certain light, and in other light they look unchanged. Fine scratching on the handle is usually cosmetic only. It can be noticed, and then ignored. The fork still works the same way, and the household often keeps using it without change. There can also be swirl marks on a polished finish. Swirl marks can come from abrasive sponges or powders. The early sign can be a circular haze. Later, the shine can look uneven across set pieces. Using a soft cloth and mild cleaners can reduce this kind of change. This may vary. Some households care about the appearance match. Some households do not notice at all. Many of these marks do not change function. The fork continues to lift and hold food. It continues to be picked up and set down. The appearance simply becomes more familiar. At a certain point, marks stop being noticed. The fork becomes normal. The household keeps using it without any thought about the thin lines on the handle. Recap: small marks appear, and life continues. Chapter 26: Bending and alignment changes. A fork can change shape slowly, and sometimes it changes shape in one small moment. Bending and twisting can happen through ordinary misuse. The change can be small enough to ignore. The fork still works, but it feels a bit different, and it rests a bit differently. One path is bending from leverage misuse. A fork can be used as a small lever. It can be pressed against something hard or used to pry. Pressure against hard foods, or prying, can bend prongs inward. Forcing under dense foods or using the fork as a small lever can bend prongs outward. These changes can begin as slight uneven alignment. Later, food can slip or catch oddly, or grip on small pieces can become less reliable. This may vary. Another path is twisting. Twisting during stirring or scraping can create a twist along the length. The early sign can be that the fork sits unevenly on a flat surface. Later, the prongs may no longer meet food evenly. Twisting motions in dense mixtures can also lead to an overall bend at the neck area, where the fork looks slightly drooped. Then the eating angle can feel uncomfortable. This may vary. Sometimes the fork is bent at the handle end. Dropping onto hard floors can create handle end dents. Early on, a dent can be a small flat spot. Later, the dent can form a slightly sharp edge at the dent. This may vary. The fork still works, but wiping can catch on that spot, and fingers may notice it when the handle is turned. A fork that sits unevenly can still be used for months. The bend may be small. The household may not notice right away. One fork can become the slightly off fork. It sits in the drawer with the others, and it still returns after washing, but it feels different in the hand, or it rests differently on a plate. Sometimes people try gentle correction by hand. The fork is held, and the prongs are pressed back, or the handle is twisted slightly, trying to return it to straightness. Sometimes the correction holds. Sometimes the bend returns after repeated stress. This is not always the same. Repeated bending back and forth can lead to uneven prong spacing. The gaps between prongs can begin to mismatch, and the fork can behave inconsistently. Prevention can be quiet. Avoid leverage and twisting. Reduce force. Use a knife when needed. These are simple habits, and they lower the chance that one fork becomes the odd one. This may vary. Even with prevention, small changes can happen, and the fork can still be used. When bending becomes part of the fork, the routine still continues. The fork is used. The fork is washed. The fork is dried. It returns. It may be kept because it is still usable, even if it is slightly bent. Or it may be set aside later, quietly. This may vary. Recap: a small bend appears, and the routine continues. Chapter 27: Stains, Spots, and Film. A fork can look clean and still hold small signs of use. These signs are often about timing. If residue dries, it holds on more firmly. If rinsed sooner, it releases more easily. This is not always the same, and it depends on how the fork is handled after a meal. One common issue is dried oils and food film in prong gaps. The spaces between prongs can hold a thin film, especially near the base of the prongs. A fork can appear clean but still hold that film. When the film dries, it can become harder to remove. It can create a faint dull look or a slightly different feel when wiping. This may vary. Hard water minerals can leave spots. Water spotting can appear as cloudy dots after drying. In some homes, spots recur and need wiping. This may vary. The spots can be small and scattered. They can appear near the prongs or along the handle. They can fade after washing and then return again after air drying. Staining from salt exposure can happen when salty residue is left wet for long periods. Early on, there can be faint discoloration. Later, there can be stubborn marks. A simple prevention is to rinse soon after use, especially after salty foods. Long exposure to salty moisture is one of the things that degrades a fork fastest. This may vary. Sometimes the fork is simply left in a sink, mixed with other utensils and dishes. The fork rests in water for a while, then the water drains, and the fork stays damp. This is not always the same. In this kind of pause, residue can cling and dry in prong gaps. The fork may look fine at a glance, then feel slightly sticky or slightly dull when wiped. Gentle remedies can keep the routine calm. A warm soak with mild soap can loosen film. Soft brushing between prongs with a gentle brush can help release residue in the gaps. Then the fork is rinsed, and then dried, and then returned. Wipe dry after washing can reduce spotting in hard water areas. Using a soft sponge or cloth can reduce scratches while cleaning. The point is not perfection. The point is a calm and repeatable process. Warm water, mild detergent, gentle brushing if needed, rinse, dry, and return. Over time, some marks may remain, and the fork still functions. It still picks up and holds food. It still rests on a plate. It still returns to the drawer. Recap: soak, rinse, dry, and return. Chapter 28: Plating and Plastic Aging Paths. Different materials age in different ways, and the changes can be quiet and gradual. Stainless steel can last many years to decades with normal care. Silver-plated forks can last years to decades, depending on plating thickness and care. Plastic disposable forks are often single-use to a few uses. This may vary. Stainless steel tends to change through surface marks more than through dramatic failure. Fine scratching, dulling, and occasional spots are common. The fork can still feel strong and stiff for a long time. This may vary. If care is gentle, the set can stay looking similar for longer. If care is rough, the set can become more mixed in shine and mark patterns. For silver-plated forks, plating wear can appear at contact points. Repeated rubbing, dishwashing, and polishing can create dull spots at high contact areas. Later, base metal can show through. This may vary. Tarnish can also appear. Tarnish can begin as soft dulling and later become darker patches. Dry storage and occasional gentle polishing can help. Tarnish is usually not a reason to replace a fork. It is often handled with gentle care. For plastic forks, the aging path can look different. Heat exposure can cause warping. Early on, prongs can curve. Later, the shape can stay bent. This may vary. Bending and stress can cause micro cracks. Early on, faint lines can appear. Later, the fork can snap under light pressure. This may vary. Plastic can also roughen at the tips. Repeated scraping can make the tips feel slightly fuzzy. Later, residue can cling more easily, and cleaning can feel incomplete. This may vary. Plastic can also hold odor. Odor retention can happen when oils are absorbed or held on the surface. It can begin as a faint smell after washing, Later, it can become a persistent odor. Quick washing and avoiding long storage while dirty can help. At some point, disposable becomes not worth keeping. The fork feels too bent or too rough, or it holds odor, and it does not feel pleasant. A plastic fork can be set aside and discarded. A silver-plated fork can be kept longer, but if plating becomes patchy and the feel becomes uneven, it can be retired. This may vary. Stainless steel can be kept the longest in many homes, and it becomes the steady background of the drawer. Even with these different paths, the tone of the change is practical. There is no ceremony. There is just a small decision, and then the routine continues. The household adjusts. It chooses the forks that feel best. It sets aside the ones that feel off. It keeps the loop steady. Recap: the material changes slowly, one cycle at a time. Chapter 29: When a fork is retired. A fork is usually retired for simple reasons. The reasons are often felt in the hand. The fork feels awkward. The fork feels rough. The fork looks patchy in a way that does not improve with normal cleaning. The household makes a quiet choice and moves on. One reason is alignment. When prongs stay bent and interfere with normal eating, the fork can be set aside. If straightening does not hold, and the shape stays awkward, replacement becomes reasonable. The fork might still pick up food, but it can feel consistently awkward, and that feeling can be enough. Another reason is roughness. Small burrs at edges can come from damage, manufacturing leftovers, or harsh abrasion. The early sign can be roughness felt when wiping. Later, cloth can snag, and fingers can feel irritation. Prevention can be gentle washing and avoiding aggressive scouring. If roughness persists and feels unpleasant, replacement becomes reasonable. For silver-plated forks, plating can wear unevenly. When plating has worn unevenly and cleaning no longer restores a consistent surface, replacement can feel reasonable. The fork may still function, but it can look patchy and the surface can feel uneven. This may vary. The household may keep it anyway, as a spare, or set it aside. Sometimes retirement is also about set coherence. Some forks stay at the bottom of the drawer for long periods, while others are used again and again because they sit on top. This may vary. Over time, the used forks can show more marks, while the ones that were rarely chosen can look newer. The set becomes uneven in age, even when it is still the same set. Loss of set coherence can happen when missing forks are replaced with different patterns. The early sign can be one fork that looks different. Later, the drawer becomes mixed. This may vary. Some homes accept this easily. Some homes notice it only when guests arrive and forks are counted. Replacement is often a quiet decision. A set feels short by one. A different fork fills the gap. A new piece appears and is placed into the tray. Over time, the drawer becomes a record of replacements. One fork differs slightly. Another fork is older. The household adapts. Mixing becomes normal, and the set still works. Forks are often replaced quietly, one at a time. The fork does its job until one day it feels off. Then it is moved aside. Another fork takes its place. The drawer still closes. The table is still set. The routines continue. Recap: a piece leaves, and another piece takes its place. Chapter 30: Quiet disappearance and reappearance. Forks are small, and they travel. A fork can leave the kitchen without anyone noticing. It can move with meals. It can pause in new locations, then return later. This is not always the same. Forks can drift to desks and bags. A fork is used at a desk, then left on a napkin. A fork is used in a lunch kit, then stays in a bag. A fork can rest in a cup by the bed or desk. A fork can be found later in a cup by the bed or desk and carried back to the sink. This may vary. Forks can also rest in cups and jars in the kitchen, where utensils are placed temporarily. They can sit upright, dry and light, until someone notices. Then they are gathered during cleaning. They are rinsed, washed, dried, and returned to the drawer. They become part of the set again. Sometimes forks return slowly after gatherings. During gatherings, more forks are used in a short time, and more forks mixed together during washing. Then forks drift into different places, and some return later. This may vary. Some forks appear days later in odd places, and rejoin the drawer without comment. Some forks do not return. The loss can be small and gradual. A set becomes short by one, then short by two. People often count forks only when guests arrive. Before guests, the drawer is opened, and forks are counted. If the count is short, a different fork fills the gap. The drawer becomes slightly mixed. One fork sometimes sits apart because it is a different size. Then that difference becomes normal. This quiet disappearance is part of why sets change. Forks sometimes become mixed across sets without a clear moment of change. A fork from another home can appear after a gathering. A fork can be packed quickly during a move. Forks are packed quickly, and they mix with other utensils. They reappear in a new drawer. This may vary. The household adapts to what it has and keeps eating. Recap: it leaves, it pauses, and sometimes it returns. Chapter 30: One End-of-Life Choices, Quiet and Practical. When a fork leaves daily use for good, the next step is usually practical. If it still works, it may be kept as a spare piece. If it is part of a usable set, it may be donated. If it is metal, it may be recycled where metal recycling is accepted. This may vary. Reuse can be simple. A fork can be kept as spare pieces for travel kits. It can be used as a temporary serving tool in a container. It can be used for non-food tasks like holding small items during sorting, quiet and occasional. This may vary. These uses are not dramatic. They are small ways a fork stays useful for a little longer. Donation can happen when a set is still usable. Sets may be donated if still usable. This may vary. Donation can also happen during moving day mixing, when utensils are packed quickly. Forks mix with other utensils, and some pieces are left behind, and some travel to the next drawer. Recycling depends on local systems. Stainless steel is often recyclable where metal recycling is accepted. This may vary. Metal forks may be recyclable depending on local systems, and some small items can be missed. This may vary. Silver-plated pieces may have base metal that may recycle, and the plating is thin and usually not separated. This may vary. Plastic depends heavily on plastic type and local acceptance. Many small utensils are not recycled in practice. This may vary. Often, single forks end up in mixed household waste. Sometimes a fork leaves the drawer long before it is thrown away. It becomes a spare in a picnic box, or it sits in a travel kit, waiting. It may be used only sometimes. It may be used as a temporary serving tool in a container, then washed and returned to a different place than before. This may vary. In this way, a fork can drift from main use into occasional use, and then into storage, and then out of the home. Single missing pieces often trigger slow replacement instead of full disposal. One fork disappears, and another fork is bought or found, and the drawer becomes slightly mixed. The old forks remain. The new fork joins them. The set changes by small steps, not by one big moment. This is not always the same, but the pattern is common. Sometimes the last step is simply clearing a drawer. A fork is gathered with other utensils. It is placed into a box for donation, or into a bin, or into waste. The action is brief. Then the drawer closes, and the space that held the fork becomes empty. The fork's end is usually calm. It leaves the drawer, and the space becomes still. Recap: it leaves the drawer, and the space becomes still. Chapter 32, gentle recap of how it slowly changes over time. A fork changes through repetition. Washing, drying, nesting, and use leave small signs. The changes are gradual and ordinary. They happen so slowly that they can feel invisible, until someone looks closely and notices a softened shine, a faint haze, or a thin line. The washing cycle repeats. Warm water touches the surface. Mild detergent lifts oils. Rinsing clears the film. Drying follows, by towel or by air. Water spots can appear in some homes. A fork can dry with a bead of water held between prongs. Then the bead dries, or slides, or falls. This may vary. The fork returns to storage and becomes still. Small marks gather. Drawer rubbing leaves thin lines. Dishwasher basket contact leaves rub marks. Plate contact leaves faint wear. Polished surfaces show scratches more easily. Satin finishes hide marks more easily. This may vary. Many forks gain fine scratches that only show in certain light. Most of these marks do not change function. Small marks appear, and life continues. Sometimes alignment changes. A fork can bend through leverage misuse. A fork can twist through stirring thick foods. The fork can sit unevenly on a flat surface. Gentle correction can help, or it may not hold. This is not always the same. One fork can become the slightly off fork and still be used for months. Stains, spots, and film come and go. Dried oils in prong gaps can hold film. Hard water minerals can leave spots. Salty residue left wet can leave stubborn marks. Gentle soaking and soft brushing between prongs can help. Then rinse, then dry, then return. The routine stays calm. Materials age in their own ways. Stainless steel can last many years to decades with normal care. Silver-plated forks can show plating wear and tarnish. Plastic can warp from heat, crack from bending, roughen at the tips, and hold odor. This may vary. When a fork feels off, it is often replaced quietly, one piece at a time, and the drawer becomes slightly mixed. Forks also disappear and reappear. They travel to desks and bags. They rest in cups and jars. They return during cleaning, or they do not. A set becomes short by one, then short by two. The household adapts. The fork story ends without ceremony, through reuse, donation, recycling where accepted, or disposal. This may vary. And through all of it, the fork stays simple. It is washed. It is dried. It returns. Small marks appear, and life continues. Recap: it is washed. It is dried. It returns.